Hello, Zalto Live listeners. Before we get started, we wanted to let you know that more teachings from Zen monk Claude AnShin Thomas are available in his two books, At Hell's Gate, A Soldier's Journey from War to Peace, and Bringing Meditation to Life, 108 Teachings on the Path of Zen Practice. Both are available wherever books are sold, and all proceeds go to the Zalto Foundation, dedicated to promoting nonviolence, awareness, and positive change.
Hello and welcome to Zalto Live, the podcast featuring Zen Buddhist monk Claude AnShin Thomas, who will share with you his life experiences that includes not only military combat, personal violence, and addiction, but also healing, transformation, and the ongoing joy of everyday life. Please enjoy listening.
What I'd like to do is start with a question from the group. Yes, Peter.
This is a question for both you and Kenshin. With death of animals occurring all the time, everywhere around you, how do you determine which animals you formally mourn when they die?
From my side, we formally mourn the animals that come to us that die in our care. And when we mourn those, we mourn all animals who die. Kenshin.
Yes, it's the same response.
It's the same when people close to us die. We mourn those people specifically. And that mourning is also for all the people who die that we don't have a connection with. Question from the group. Yes, Yo Zen.
How are you dealing with restless energy when you have a situation where you can rest and want to rest, but there is this restless energy?
That's not even a problem. I just lay down and rest. Together with my restless energy. Just chill. A question that was mailed in. What are my thoughts on the situation that at the moment, often the narrative is either that one is either for one side or for the other side, but that you cannot be both. Do you think one needs to take sides? Well, I think that taking sides continues to perpetuate the suffering. Yes, so, and for me, it's not about taking sides. It's about the senselessness of war and violence, and suffering. Now, I looked up a number today. So I was a soldier in the Vietnam War. In the 10 years of the Vietnam War, somewhere between 1 and 2 million civilians were killed. We were responsible for that. This is what I look at. The roots of war, violence, and suffering in me. And when fighting, this brand of fighting stops, then I want the opportunity to be there, to support those who want to work through the real cost of war. Question from the group. Yes, Grace.
Hello.
Hello.
This is a big one. You ready? What do you think are the roots of anti-Semitism over the centuries?
You know, Grace, I really appreciate you asked that question, because I've asked that question. You know, I honestly don't know. I don't really quite understand it. And I've heard all sorts of stories and possibilities, but honestly, I really don't understand. I understand that it exists. It is a reality, and that kind of hatred, whomever it is projected onto, you know, it breaks my heart, and it simply it's a driving force that to compel me to wake up to the roots of war, violence, and suffering in me, and to understand at more and more subtle levels how that manifests itself. When I see all the hatred, what I do understand, like from my own training, from my own conditioning, how the other is created as the source of all of my difficulties. And that only if I get rid of the other will my difficulties be resolved. But I come back to the United States. The United States spent trillions of dollars and countless lives in Afghanistan to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. But they were demonized. In my case, the Vietnamese were demonized. There was always the other. The problems and the issues are not external. They're personal. Yes. A question that was mailed in. What would I say to someone who tells me that they are sad that Muslims are often portrayed as terrorists or backward conservative in the news or in the public opinion? This comes back to my response to Grace. Like, in contemporary films, Russians are always depicted as the gangsters. Yes, or it's the Chinese. And I'm talking from a cultural U.S. perspective. I understand how it happens because I've also been subject to that propaganda. And I also perpetuated some of those myths. It's the diminishing of one group out of fear, out of insecurity, to elevate themselves or another group. And I just don't. I understand that it happens, and I don't understand why people don't understand. It's just violence is just not a solution. Really, you just can't eliminate the issues externally. So in a simple microcosm, I watch how the projections then come onto me. And nobody really sees me. They see their idea of me. And they hold on to that idea as if it was an absolute fact. There may be a kernel of truth in there. But if you really want to know me, you have to take the time to sit down with me, be present with me, and to be willing to notice the judgments and reactions, and to be curious about the roots of those, which can only be discovered when I stop reacting or judging. I said this to another person. The vows that I've taken, Bodhisattva vows, part of them is that I must be willing to give up everything in support of awakening, in support of the truth. Yes, the other is not the problem. I'm prepared to give up my life for the other. Not in combat. Killing is not the solution. But whatever I can do to support and protect the other. Question from the group. First, Genrai, and then Kyoto.
And so do you do anything special or specific on Veterans Day?
Yes, for those of you who may not be familiar with this day, on the 11th of November, there was established a day to honor former combat soldiers in the United States. It's a solemn day for me. I just wish we'd quit creating more and more veterans. And it's sad for me, the commercialization of it, and sometimes the shallowness of it. But I need I gotta be careful I don't go off on a rant here.
Yeah.
But I also discovered that today there's a similar type of day in England. Yes, because Keith Angyo is in England right now. He sent me a text informing me about the day. So in England, it's the 12th of November. Kyoto.
On the newspaper, in television, they always speak about the civilian that die during the war, but they don't speak too much about the soldier that die. What is your perception about this way to perceive the reality?
I guess there's an expectation that soldiers die or are so seriously wounded. And it doesn't carry the same weight that a non-soldier dying carries. But it's impossible. What's also not talked about is the reality of moral injury, the real cost of war, and how that continues to weave its way through the fabric of society and cultures. Yeah, there was a person attending the retreat here who was Russian, whose mother is a doctor in Russia, and the person talked about the number of suicide attempts amongst young Russian soldiers from the fighting in Chechnya, the real cost of war for those who perpetrate it. Question from the group. Yes, Gabi and then Myoshin.
So my question is similar with going to war. Women are being raped. It's part of it. And also this is not being talked about. Do you think that's out of similar reasons? Or is it because it's a topic that is filled with shame?
Women are experiencing sexual violence whether in war or not. And I think this is a manifestation of this deep-rooted conditioning, the objectification of women, seeing women as inferior or less than. But then women become simply targets for male rage. It is, again, it's this seeing the other as a source of my difficulties or the solution to my problems. Yes. Question from the group.
Myoshin, huh?
Oh yeah, Myoshin, sorry. Thank you.
Anshin, are you aware of the trend to speak about moral injury and moral distress in the world of healthcare and healthcare workers?
I am.
What do you think about that application of these terms, moral injury and moral distress?
Well, I think it absolutely is applicable. What a healthcare professional faces, while on the surface appearing the same, is in fact not the same as a combat soldier. So we need to see the realities of moral injury within the context of the application. We risk diminishing the reality of moral injury if we start lumping all these things together. Yeah, the post-traumatic stress, the moral injury of a police officer or a firefighter, while absolutely real, is different from that of a combat soldier. Because as a combat soldier, I can't just decide to quit my job and go home. And for those of us in combat, that possibility doesn't exist. I mean, it does, but then we can be killed for that decision, or we can end up in prison. Question from the group. Yes, KG.
So with the German military, a soldier is obligated to follow orders, unless those orders are against human rights. Isn't that a little bit much responsibility asked of them?
Well, theoretically, you're correct. I mean, as a soldier, you don't have to follow any order. But then you have to be prepared to pay those consequences. And we can't know what those are. We can't use the argument of just following orders. We can't absolve ourselves from responsibility using that argument. We can't absolve ourselves of personal responsibility. That's why I continually say in public and amongst people I engage with, there's not one thing I can change about what I was responsible for as a combat soldier in war. I'm also not a good person or a bad person because of what I've done. I am, though, responsible. And without a disciplined spiritual practice, rooted in self-reflection, without a real desire to accept responsibility for my actions, there is no way that I will ever know how to be responsible. Because how to be responsible is revealed to me. Question in the group. Yes, Peter.
Do you think that the people who give orders to the soldiers suffer moral injury?
I hope so. I would say that I support a number of people who were giving orders, but were themselves also involved. And I know profoundly how they're affected. I can't wipe the dust from their eyes. What I can do is be there as a solid, stable voice, not preaching, not attempting to convince or coerce, but just to be very clear with my experience, as solid as I can be in my awareness, because at a certain point, the people who give the orders will not be able to avoid the reality of moral injury. In the United States, the suicide rate amongst upper-ranking officers is significant because they live in a world where they're locked into the idea that they have to project a certain image, that their decisions are always right and necessary. Question from the group. Yes, Yoshi.
When I'm speaking with my Israeli friends whose relatives are fighting in Gaza, whose family members are being bombed in Tel Aviv, is my perspective meaningless and irrelevant? Or should I share it?
Let me draw a parallel of sorts. During the fighting in the Balkans, I was 3 times into the Balkans. I arrived in the village of Srebrenica about 3 or 4 days after the massacre there. And I found a fountain sort of I guess it was the center of the village, I don't know. And I just sat there. And soon people started to talk to me. Some of them understood I didn't speak their language, and they spoke to me in English. And some just talked at me. And I had nothing to say. Just listen. I need to be educated. So with my Israeli friends, the IDF soldiers that I support, I have nothing to say. I need to be educated. I need to be willing to see things from their perspective. I'm going to meet with a Russian soldier. He was a Russian soldier in Afghanistan. He's in prison in Italy for murder. And I need to listen to him. I need to see listening to him, what it brings me in contact. Living and studying in the first monastery I lived in. I made a bed for myself in the barn. It was elevated. I needed that safe space. And every night, one man came. I watched him, and he would walk 2 meters towards me, a little more than 6 feet. He'd walk 2 meters to his left, again 2 meters to his left, and again 2 meters to his left. He'd do this for about 15, 20 minutes. What I understood, he was pacing in his cell. He didn't know I was there. I left it like that. I don't know if he ever spoke about his imprisonment or if he just did what was important for him to do in the dark by himself. But I was there to bear witness. So I just listened. Yes, and see the feelings, the thoughts and perceptions that rise up in me through just listening. It is a point of practice. Really pay attention. Thoughts, my feelings. Watch how when they come together, they form perception. It's incredibly important for me to wake up to the mind that I have been conditioned to believe is my mind, so that I have the opportunity to really be present.
Thank you for listening to this episode on Zalto Live. If you would like additional information, please look at the show notes or visit zalto.org. That's ZALTHO.org. Our work is made possible solely through donations, so please consider making a tax-deductible gift on our website. We wish you well and thank you.